What's going on, everyone? Taylor Kyles here for CLNS Media. We are still on Bill Belichick watch here in Pats Nation, but we've got plenty of news to cover. We heard about Mike Vrabel today, Josh McDaniels, a little bit of Scott Pioli, and we also got a very illuminating piece from Trent Brown, who gave a behind-the-scenes look at how he feels about some of the narratives that have been spun about him this season, as well as how he feels about some of the things going on in the building. That piece was written by Dakota, Randall, so I figured why not have him on to talk about the piece and give his thoughts on some of the things we learned about today. Thank you so much for coming on, buddy. How you doing?
I'm good, man, and I'm just glad that I can join now and we don't have to spend a single second talking about draft scenarios and draft math. That is pencils down. So it is. I'm glad that's behind us.
Definitely don't miss the headache that was trying to do all that math. But like I said, you had a really good piece today for NESN talking about Trent Brown because obviously there's been so many reports going on this year about did he give up on the team? You know, he was a healthy scratch in the one game where it kind of seemed like, all right, maybe, all the rumors, there's a little bit something to them. So I want to get your perspective. You share what you wrote on the piece and also just what you think personally, maybe expand if you'd like. First, shooting down some of the BS reports and inaccurate leaks. Could you touch on what exactly those were and how he felt about those reports? Because he never wanted to hold back on what he thinks, and he really didn't agree with some of the stuff that's been said about him this season.
Yeah, and some of that goes back to earlier in the season around when he didn't make the trip out to Germany because he missed the two games after the Miami. He played against Miami, that didn't play against Washington and Indianapolis. The Indianapolis game was in Germany. And if you remember around then, there was the report that he had been habitually late to meetings. And it was around that time that he had a death in the family. I believe his uncle, he was still injured. And that's when Trent first started speaking up, both to me and to other reporters, really pushing back against that stuff about the fact that he was late to meetings and in a particularly transparent way, which, as a reporter piqued my interest. I'm like, this is someone who I'd like to talk to down the road. So he was very candid while talking to him, which obviously, again, I really appreciated. And he said a lot of stuff in there about a variety of topics, including, what he thinks is wrong with the current state of the Patriots, both from a personnel standpoint and from just a general franchise philosophy standpoint, how they treat players. But the real thing he wanted to get across, and what I tried to do with the story, which was just let him tell his side of the story, was fighting back against what he thought was, unfair reports about him, not being willing to battle through injuries, either because he had an eye toward free agency or because he didn't want to risk getting hurt and suffering a season-ending injury, which would have, ruined his chance at getting usage rate incentives, which he wound up not getting anyway. That he thought that was bogus. That he just generally was tough to motivate during what was a lost season for the Patriots. The report from the Herald that he was openly speaking in the locker room a day after the game about wanting to play for an NFC team. He, was really. I have no reason to doubt the reporting from Doug and Andrew on that, but Trent, obviously offered a full denial of that. And as far as my personal feeling, I do think, some of it, Trent's got to look out for him. He wants to kind of clear his name as he goes into free agency, and I'm sure that's part of it. I'm sure, he's not going to come out and say that he, did a terrible job of being a professional this year. So, some of it you got to take with a grain of salt, of course, but I do think it's, he does, I do want to back him up on some of the things in that, he did play through a lot last year. He played all 17 games. There was, I think, the game against Chicago, he was really sick, and he still went out there and played. I thought, he deserves credit for that. He played really well over the first 7 or 8 weeks this season. He was one of the best tackles in football, and he really did battle through injuries. I saw him in the locker room after that game in Miami. I think you were there as well. Yeah. He could not walk. That was legit. And so I think, all that's true. And he battled through that concussion early in the season. But whether or not he kept that up once the season started to go in the tank, that's up for debate. And obviously he shared his thoughts on that.
Of course. And I will say I was on the train of trying to defend Trent Brown for a lot of the season, especially because of what he did last year. Like, I think it was before the Bills game where the guy lost, was like 10 pounds or something because he was so sick. Still didn't miss a game. You mentioned in the piece that he battled I am not advocating for this. I wish he hadn't done it, but he fought through a concussion in the first game of the season. Then, like you
Yeah.
said, he saw how hobbled he was, and he was still trying to fight back against Buffalo this year. He got rolled up on and still tried to play and finish the game. I think if you're really watching the game, and we have the access to really see how hard he battled in terms of seeing what it did to him after these games, it was pretty clear that this wasn't a dude who was just, playing for himself. It looked like he was trying to play for his team. Things just got a little wonky when it came to, the play in Denver where we see there's the play where he's out in space, I think it was on a screen, and just kind of looking around.
Right.
Is there any context that he added about the on-field effort? Because I feel like for years that's been the big thing with him where, my piece in that has always been he's a big guy. I know you want him to throw his body around, but at some point it's just unrealistic for him to, make some of the efforts people expect of him. So was there any context added to some of that criticism?
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, others have made the point that the effort that he put forth in that Denver game did look below the bar. Just to be, you got to call it as it is. What he said, and again, all I can really do is take him at his word, was that he was sick for like the last 5 weeks of the season, really sick, and he did show up on the injury report a lot with an illness. He said that he had the flu and strep throat, which is why in week 15, which is why he missed the game against the Chiefs when Connor McDermott suffered a season-ending injury. But he said that he felt like he had to tough it out for the game in Denver, despite still being really sick. So he went out there and played. But the combination of being very sick and not being able to breathe already, plus the altitude in Denver, he didn't feel that he was able to go out there and really play at a high level. He said it was tough to come off the bench cold against what he described as guys on the edge running 4.5s that are in the flow of the game. It was hard for him to get up to speed based on how he felt and just coming off the bench cold and in an environment that was cold. And so the other thing is he continually and repeatedly said that one of the things he wanted to do was prop up Vidarian Lowe, who he thought was playing really well, who I agree was playing well at the end of the season. Now, and then I heard people making this point on the radio today, and I don't necessarily disagree that, like, as a competitor, like, you'd think you'd want to be like, whatever, I still want to be out there. But he said he just was like, the team's playing well, Vidarian's playing well, don't screw up the rotation. That's what he said about it. But he said he was really sick and not feeling well in Denver. And then he said when the team got back, he had developed bronchitis that he found out early in the week. And then when he went into the facility on Wednesday, they gave him an inhaler. And he said he had a bad reaction to it that really messed him up. And then he wasn't feeling any better Thursday. When he returned Friday, he didn't get any reps in practice. And so that led to the healthy scratch, which we all sort of wrote down as a healthy scratch. And it still seems that way. But if Trent is telling the truth, then it really wasn't a healthy scratch because he was very sick. How much that factored into the Patriots' decision to make him inactive is I guess still unclear. But I do believe him, and I don't think it's I think it's true. He was very sick throughout the final quarter of the season. I think it impacted his play on the field and impacted the Patriots' willingness to put him out there when they might have also wanted to get a look at Vidarian Lowe, which I don't blame them for that either.
Yeah, especially knowing that he was sick in Denver, and we knew how much like everything he was going through was impacting his play. I think I understand the criticism of saying, you should be out there, you want to be a competitor, be on the field. But then if you're not playing well, fans are going to criticize you for being selfish and putting yourself out there when you're not playing at 100%. And I think at times it's fair to say he was a liability. There were times where guys were beating him off the edge and he wasn't even getting a hand on them. And like you said, he was one of the best tackles in football when the season started. So, it was a very stark difference in his play. And when he was the healthy scratch, I feel like that twisted the narrative where it seemed like, yeah, this guy's really battling through some stuff. But then when you think he's healthy and then a healthy scratch, then it's okay, what's going on? And then all the effort stuff that's been following him for a while kind of creeps up. So, I think it's understandable if the guy really did think, and because Lowe was playing better, and if, Trent Brown's going out there saying, hey, I'm cold, I'm not feeling well already, let Vidarian Lowe stay out there. He knows what this rusher's patterns are, all these things. I think it makes sense, but I also understand some of the criticism. But another one of the interesting things in your report was how Brown wasn't happy with how he was being treated and how the Patriots handle players in general. There were a lot of things you touched on. I want to make sure that you can cover them all. What were some of those things? And, what were your thoughts on them in terms of, did it seem like maybe, I'm not trying to be rude here, but did it seem like maybe excuse making, or did it seem to you like some valid points that he was making?
A little bit of both. Like for instance, I
Mhm.
look at the fact that he throughout the interview said it's all about the team. All I want to do is win. I always put the team first. Like I'm always going to do that. And then he openly admits that he reports to the offseason program. And then because the Patriots had him working with the twos, that he thought that made no sense and it was stupid. So he decided to leave. Um,
Mm.
and so I'm like, and on the one hand, I get that. Like he's a veteran. He said he stayed away from OTAs because he wanted to be a father. I totally get that. But it's hard. We know how the Patriots feel about OTAs in the offseason program. And that it really is. They want everybody to be there. And then so just for it to not be the exact role that you wanted, now you're going to leave. Okay. But then it's hard to go after the fact, say, all along you've always been for what's been the best interest of the team and try to absolve yourself of all guilt. Like I don't think those two things square. And so yeah, there were things like that. The most sort of illuminating stuff to me was, he was saying that, the team really is going to struggle to turn things around and attract free agents and keep players retain, their in-house free agents if they don't change the way they treat some of these guys, whether that be, giving them bye-week schedules at the very last minute. So they have to book expensive flights or it upends their travel, whether it's what Trent described as an extremely hard offseason program that is not like, offseason programs everywhere else. He thought he was better off working out at home throughout the summer break rather than in Foxborough, where he thought you put too much mileage on your body that can hamper you in the long run. And he said that coaches told him that during staff meetings, they were devising ways to sort of maybe lay like traps for him that would sort of expose his character or, try and make them learn more about him or whether they could trust him. And when I asked him for examples, that's when he kind of harkened back to the stuff in the spring where, maybe in a way, maybe they were right. Where if, he talked about the example of, they said, we want you to report for the offseason program so that you can get your timing down with Cole Strange. Trent does that. He's not working with Cole Strange. He's working with the twos. And maybe that was the Patriots saying, let's see how you react to this. Trent reacted by saying, all right, I'm going home. So, it just, I think there's a way the Patriots do things. And I just don't think it jives with him. But I think you also have to point out that at the same time, there are a lot of players who, they admit how tough it is, but they embrace it and they like it. Jabril Pepper is someone like that. David Andrews, Juwan Bentley, all these guys. It just might not be for someone like Trent. And he also added to me that, they no longer have the incentive of coming here to play with Tom Brady. He said that's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So he just said until they sort of change some of these things and treat players with what he called more respect and more common decency, that they might struggle to attract the players that need to turn things around. So I thought that all that stuff was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and as an outsider, I mean, it does definitely sound strange when a team is looking for, as he put it, ways to F with him. That definitely is a little odd to try to antagonize one of your best players. But at the same time, if you're someone where the team feels that they have to do that to see where your head's at or what your commitment is, it just, it feels like a continuation of what's been a pretty toxic relationship where the Patriots decide not to invest in offensive tackle for years, and they put themselves in a position where they have to kind of put up with, some of the stuff that Trent Brown does do that they don't agree with. And then Trent Brown kind of has to go with it as well because it worked with him and he has a history with the team, and maybe his market isn't great elsewhere, or at least it hasn't been in the past. And it just, it's interesting. And then he also gave some insight. Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
I was going to say one quick note on his complaint about the schedules and how other teams around the league will, like, start of the season, they'll give all the players, here's your full schedule for the year, or at least at the start of the month they'll be like, here's everything you need to know about this month. Whereas the Patriots, it might just be like the day before, or like with only a few days notice. I don't know their reasoning for do that at different points in the year, but I do know that a lot of times that is with the intention of they like to keep players on their toes, so that players, like, they don't know what to expect, and then how do they adjust? How do they handle curveballs when things aren't made easy for them? An example being, there will be times in training camp where we don't know, okay, it's Friday. Are they practicing Saturday? Are they going to practice in 2 days? And the players also don't know. And I know that part of that is them wanting to keep the players on their toes and have to be ready for anything. whether they should maintain that, like Trent said, at around the bye week when players want to know if they can go home, that's up for debate. But I just wanted to add that context.
Also interesting when we're in the midst of this whole Bill Belichick thing, will he stay or will he go? And then you talk about how they could potentially move on if he does go. It's a kind of area where you think a guy like a Gerard Mayo or a Mike Vrabel, who are former players, may have a different perspective on that and be able to walk that line of, we know how Belichick does things. We understand how this is valuable, but also we understand how we can tweak this as, having our own opinions and our own feelings based on how this happened with us when we were players. A lot of interesting stuff there. We got some more insights from Trent Brown I want to talk about, but real quick, word from our friends over at FanDuel. We'll be back.
NFL season is wrapping up, and there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. Now, the app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. Find bets in the new Explore tab. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Yeah, so another illuminating part of this report was that Trent Brown seems to agree with the masses and that Mac Jones was not set up to succeed. One of the parts that I really found interesting was that he directly mentioned Ted Karras, how well he played before he was allowed to walk in for agency for what was a pretty solid deal, something it felt like the Patriots could match at the time. And then obviously they also got rid of Shaq Mason for a 5th-round pick. You can debate, whether that was a good move or not, because they did have Mike Nwenu in waiting, and they figured he was the future at that position. But what did Brown share with you in terms of Mac Jones, how they handled him, and how they think how Brown thought that he could potentially fare with the team moving forward?
Yeah, Trent very much falls in the camp of that, Mac doesn't deserve nearly as much blame as he's been getting, that, he had a good rookie year. And then basically after that, he was set up to fail. I would agree with that take. I think, certainly Mac Jones this year deserves some of the, he deserves blame for the way he played. But, I believe that, part of what happened to Mac and his unraveling was just an accumulation of so long of not being able to trust the blocking, not being able to trust the route running, not being able to trust the play calling, the whole operation around him, and eventually it all unraveled. Trent really highlighted the mismanagement of the offensive line after Mac's rookie season. Again, he specified the decisions in the 2022 offseason to let Ted Karras, who played really well at left guard that season, was a versatile member of the offensive line that could do a lot, to sign with the Cincinnati Bengals, then traded Shaq Mason to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I actually did not mind that trade at the time, because I thought, you should be able to develop a succession plan there. I don't mind that. But what Trent said, and this is one of those things where I had to present his quote the way he said it, but I wish I could have found a way maybe to present it in how I think he meant it, because he said, I think if you don't trade, if you pay Ted Karras, that solves an issue. I think if you don't trade Shaq Mason, who's an all-pro guard, that solves an issue. I don't think it was necessary for those moves to be made, and then to not really replace them with guys of their caliber. I think some people maybe might read that comment as him maybe sending a shot at Cole Strangers of the world, or City So, or Antonio Maffi. I don't think that's how he meant it. I think he just meant, the reality that if they didn't go replace Ted Karras and Shaq Mason with established, experienced NFL starters. They replaced them partly with Cole Strange, who was an inexperienced rookie from Chattanooga State. Then they went out and got, City So and other mid-round picks the year after that, where none of these guys are established and they have a lot of development to do. They weren't ready-made replacements. I think that was the point that he was making. And so he just generally thought the mismanagement of the O-line had a lot to do with Mac Jones's unraveling, as well as what we've all talked about, which is putting Patricia at offensive play caller last year. So it was interesting. And then, I asked him, do you think if they go out and draft a quarterback at the top of the draft this year, do you think, that they would be able to succeed with the Patriots in their current state? And he said they would run into the same issues. Trent Brown, very much a Mac Jones truther, if you will.
I mean, I think a lot of what he said, it's what a lot of us have been saying. It's been pretty obvious that, well, Mac Jones, the turnovers were inexcusable, and no one's arguing against that. But he came into the league as someone it was well understood that he would need help. If he got support, he would be able to elevate his game with the accuracy, with the decision-making, with, his cerebral play, all of that stuff. Didn't work out because, as Trent mentioned, you kind of take away his interior offensive line, and then not that Trent said this, but also you don't really invest in the tackle spot, as I mentioned earlier, and then the inconsistency with receiver. But with all that said, and with as transparent as he was, do you think that there is a chance Trent Brown can actually return? And do you think he even should return, considering, once again, this seems like it's been a pretty toxic relationship for quite some time?
Well, I can't imagine he returns if everything stays in place the way it is now, if it's Bill, if it's all that. I'd be curious just in general and I know you're going to get into all this stuff, but if Mike Vrabel becomes the coach, how does that just change things from a player recruitment standpoint across the board? To someone like, does Trent Brown then, look at it and say, well, things are going to change around here, I'll stay here? I don't know. But I just wonder what kind of impact. I think, a lot of people's knee-jerk reaction is Mike Vrabel's a player's coach. Players will come here to play for him. But I do still think players want to come play for Bill. Not every player wants to play for Bill Belichick, but I do think he still is a draw. To say that he's not, I think is just people trying to craft a narrative. I do think he still is something that draws players to New England, just not every kind of player. But as far as Trent goes, if Belichick stays here, there's no way. He said he'd be open to it, but first they'd have to hash things out and kind of have an honest discussion with each other. I just don't see it happening. But if there's a coaching change and it's someone from the outside and a total overhaul of the staff, you never know, because they haven't developed a succession plan, and they might be forced into a situation where they have to explore a reunion with Trent Brown because they just don't have any other options.
Yeah,
unless they draft somebody, right?
Right, of course. And as we've said, Trent Brown is one of the best players in this position, but you also have to think about the fact that injuries have been a factor. He's getting older. At some point, you need to start investing in that offensive tackle spot, whether it's through the draft, through free agency, whatever it is. You need some youth there. You re-sign you re-sign Mike Vrabel. That's great. If you want him at right tackle, you got that spot. But at left tackle, even if you do bring Trent Brown back, you need to have somebody who can potentially replace him. So considering, and we talked about this on the last show, offensive tackle, it's such a hard position to get a really good player. You might still have to spend that second round pick, maybe, trade into the first to get a quality player. So you don't obviously love the insurance and to have a talented player, but I think you need to make some kind of significant move there anyway, even if you do re-sign Trent Brown. So it'd be interesting to see what would happen, depending on what happens with the coaching situation. And if Bill sits down, he's like, all right, I'm not going to mess with you anymore. No more games. I'm just going to expect you to do your job. We're going to get into
my personal prediction. I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I floated this in the media room the other day, and I was kind of met with laughs, but I believe it. If I had to predict right now, I think Vidarian Lowe is the week 1 starter at left tackle next year. Not because I think he should be, but I could see a scenario in which the Patriots, they have to use the top pick on a quarterback. And I'd assume that then they would use that second round pick, which would be 34 or 35th overall, on a tackle. But what if they don't? What if they, again, don't? What if they wait until the third round, which is still a high pick for a tackle? But maybe that guy's just not ready day one. That happens. You want him to be. If you're going to use a high pick on a tackle, you'd want him to be ready day one. But if he's not, what do you do? Unless they go out and get a big free agent. But I feel like they're going to go the draft route. And so I just can easily see a world in which Vidarian Lowe, with another offseason under his belt, I do think he played well down the stretch here. Again, like we talked about before, I think there have been times where he also played very, very poorly. But you get the right coaching, you set up the line around him. It just wouldn't shock me if that is just the situation week 1 next year until the draft pick is ready. I could see it happening.
I don't think that's a crazy idea, especially because that's pretty much how they're set up now. Like you said, if they get a young guy, unless you're going to spend money on somebody else, you need a veteran, and he would be your veteran most guy in the room. Even coming into the Patriots, I talked to him earlier in the season, he had to learn a different way to pass block because for whatever reason in Minnesota, they teach you to block outside in, which makes absolutely zero sense. But you're learning new techniques. Then that was put on its head even more because once Adrian Clem had to leave due to health reasons, then Belichick comes in and starts teaching them Scarnecchia's system, and then it's a whole cluster there. So maybe if you get a consistent offensive line coach who's more experienced, has a history of success, and can actually put his players in position to succeed, maybe we see some kind of jump from Vidarian Lowe. Real quick, we're going to get into the recent news we found out today about Vrabel, McDaniels, Pioli, some potential reunions in New England. First, quick word from our friends at SeatGeek. Be right back.
I've been looking for the best deal on Celtics tickets, and with over 28 million downloads, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app. There are more than 70,000 events every single day on SeatGeek, including concerts, sports festivals, and more. With the NFL, NBA, and NHL seasons in full swing, you don't want to miss out. SeatGeek has your tickets to every game. Plus, artists like Travis Scott are on tour. They put all the tickets across the web in one place to make sure you're getting a good deal. Each ticket is rated on a scale of 1 to 10, so look for the green dots. Green means good and red means bad. Every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee, and SeatGeek is the only site that lets you return your tickets ahead of the event with swaps. So as you know, I always come through for you guys. You can use my code DREAMERSPRO for $20 off tickets at SeatGeek. That's $20 off your first purchase with promo code DREAMERSPRO. Make sure you check the link in the description to download the app.
So news broke earlier today that Mike Vrabel was fired as head coach of the Tennessee Titans. Had a great first 4 seasons, winning seasons, won Coach of the Year just 2 seasons ago. But the past 2 years, he did have losing seasons. A lot of that was due to the roster situation in Tennessee. And reportedly, he did not get along with general manager Rand Carthon. And it seemed like the Titans decided to go with the general manager and find a new head coach, rather than retain Vrabel and then just go out and find a new general manager, as it was Carthon's first season. And it was actually reported by Bleacher Report's Jordan Schultz yesterday that Vrabel would have had interest in returning to New England if he was released. So, with everything going on with Bill Belichick, it seems like Vrabel is at the top of a lot of people's head coaching candidates list. Obviously, he already said he might want to come back to New England. He referred to New England as we when he came back for the Hall of Fame speech. So, do you think that he should be the top candidate for New England as the potential head coaching replacement? And if Bill Belichick stays, do you still think there's a spot for him on the staff with Jerod Mayo already here and seeming like he might be the succession plan?
For Vrabel on the staff with Jerod Mayo?
Yes.
No, I think he's probably the top head coaching candidate right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'd assume, right? I mean, other than Belichick, if Belichick is gone.
Right.
You know, I think it wasn't long ago where we were saying Mike Vrabel might be like one of the 2 or 3 best head coaches in football. You know, that's what losing the last 2 years will do. But it was clear that it was not a functional relationship with the Titans general manager, and that things had just, I mean, he didn't have a good roster over there, and he deserves some of that blame for sure. But, you know, I think you couldn't have drawn this up any better if you're the Crafts. This is like exactly the candidate who needed to shake free for them. You know, I think if Vrabel wasn't available, I mean, that's when you really started getting into the territory of like, well, what is a better option for the Patriots? Like, is just handing over the keys to Jerod Mayo? Like, how is that an immediate upgrade? How does that get you to where you want to be right away? And then if it's not Jerod Mayo, you know, what are your other options out there? And so I think that kind of fed into the notion of like, well, maybe the Crafts will think twice about this, and they'll ultimately retain Belichick because the backup options aren't any good. But with, you know, Vrabel coming free, I think changes all that. I think that would be an excellent hire for them. He should be the top candidate. And I mean, honestly, just personal feeling, like I think you got to do it. They gotta, you know, pull the cord on Belichick. You know, I know there are arguments for him staying, but I just think it's time. I think if Belichick was being honest, he probably believes it's time. Everyone believes it's time. And Mike Vrabel is the perfect replacement for a variety of reasons. I think they should just try and make this happen as soon as possible, even though I believe NFL rules would prevent it from happening like any sooner than January 22nd or so.
Right. And I will say, I've been a proponent for Jerod Mayo. I think maybe I'm just holding on to that leash just because I really like the idea of him becoming a coach. I feel like he's done so well in the capacity he's been in, his experience with the team, his experience outside of football. You know, a lot of people tend to expect that Mayo is just going to be another Bill Belichick. I think that couldn't be further from the truth because he carries himself completely differently. And I feel like
business savvy, his business background, he's embraced analytics. Like he's kind of like a modernized Belichick in that regard. But I just think it's Vrabel's experience. Like Gerard Mayo, I think, is going to be a great head coach one day, and there are some reports out there that the team feels this way, that it's just too early for him, that their ideal scenario was Belichick's going to coach here for a couple more years, break that record, then hopefully Mayo's ready. But right now, I might be too soon, but it's not too soon for Mike Vrabel.
And that's the thing. For me, it was, if the Crafts don't think Mayo's ready, then that's like done deal. If he's not in a position where, like you said, you want somebody who can turn this around quickly. And if that's not Mayo, I completely understand. I'm all for Vrabel. Maybe Mayo sticks around, gets an elevation or something. You also got DeMarcus Covington. It's a really great defensive staff. There's a lot of candidates to potentially. And also, we saw it reported that was Adam. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on. Thank you, Adam Peters, could potentially be handcuffed with Vrabel in a situation where that's a general manager who he does see eye to eye with. And I mean, if you can get a general manager and a head coach who are in lockstep to bring into your organization where you've got draft capital, you got money, you've got a really good defense, you have a good offensive line to start with. It still needs some pieces, but you have the capital to rebuild that side of the ball and make it look a lot different. I would agree. Honestly, you talked me into Vrabel even more. I'm kind of doing it about face, so I really like that perspective. Last thing before I get you out of here, another couple of reunions that have been linked to the Patriots. Ben Bowen reported today that Scott Pioli could be interested in coming back to the Patriots in a general manager position if Belichick stays, and Josh McDaniels could come back on the offensive staff if Bill Belichick stays. Now, the McDaniels part from Pioli makes sense. I don't love it because he still seems like a guy who would defer to Bill for the final.
Totally.
And, I don't know how much it gives you a different perspective, I guess, but I don't know how much that really helps you. But with McDaniels, obviously did a great job. He's a great offensive coordinator. Nobody's doubting that. I think just on paper, he did do a better job than Bill O'Brien, although, Bill O'Brien in his one season had Hernandez and Gronkowski. That's a pretty good setup. But at the same time, if Belichick stays, does he fire Bill O'Brien and then say, all right, McDaniels, it's your ship again? Do they work together? Because that's a weird situation where it's two guys who have been on the team as coordinators and quarterbacks coaches, big personalities, big voices. What's your take on the McDaniels and the Pioli situation? Do you think they'd be a good fit? And for McDaniels specifically, how do you think that would even work?
Well, on Belichick potentially firing Bill O'Brien, the one thing there is we don't know his contract details, but I have to imagine, just given his background and pedigree and also how important it was for the Patriots to secure that hire last offseason, I bet he's a pretty well-paid assistant. And so it's usually not Belichick's MO to fire a guy, have him be on the books, even though they're separate books, and then go work for free somewhere else. I would just be surprised if they did that. But at the same time, it's how do him and McDaniels work together? Especially where all the stuff that we learned in the Herald story about the hierarchy with the offensive coaching staff, with Will Lang, or with Bill O'Brien at the top, then Will Lang and Evan Rothstein, and how that kind of, so distrust with the other staffers and with some of the players not knowing what to do. Now you add Josh McDaniels in there. What's that dynamic like? I don't see how that could work. On paper, if you're building a Madden coaching staff, exactly. That's awesome. You win, but I don't see how that benefits anybody. But it would be fascinating to see if Vrabel's the head coach, what he would do, because he previously coached under Bill O'Brien. Is he going to come in and fire his old boss? And insert McDaniels. There's so many interesting former Patriot dynamics in play here with all this stuff that it's just going to be fascinating to see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, bottom line, you got to maintain some health on your coaching staff, because the roster is one problem, but it got way worse when that report did come out and you were like, oh my God, it's completely an internal, I don't want to say nightmare, but it definitely wasn't good. And real quick, I am curious, because if Mike Vrabel does come in and replace Bill Belichick, he worked under Bill O'Brien. He was a linebackers coach for O'Brien for 3 years, then became his defensive coordinator. But you've also got Arthur Smith, who was just released by the Falcons and is on the market, who also worked for Mike Vrabel. So how do you think that would potentially work? And like you mentioned, O'Brien might have a contract that keeps him locked in. Do you think that maybe Vrabel tries to make it work where he brings in Arthur Smith in some capacity? Or do you think, he maybe gives Bill O'Brien the keys and says, hey, the offense is yours. I'm going to handle most of the defense and be the CEO who handles the players and everything. How would you see that potentially working out?
Well, that's a great question. The Arthur Smith angle is fascinating because, I bet Robert Kraft would like to do McDaniels. I he loves Josh McDaniels. He trusts Josh McDaniels. I bet Josh McDaniels would like to be here, all that stuff. But are you going to hire Vrabel and then right from the get-go do but you can't, you can't hire your full staff. I'm going to control some of the staffs you hire. So I don't know. I mean, I think if you hire Vrabel, you have to say hire whoever you want. And then if I'm Mike Vrabel, like he probably would go with Arthur Smith, right? Like that's the guy he knows, that he's comfortable with. But at the same time, it's like reuniting with Josh McDaniels just makes so much sense. And I don't know where else Josh McDaniels could go unless he pairs up with Bill with the Chargers or something. So if Bill Belichick is here, I feel like McDaniels is going to be here one way or the other. We saw that report from Jeff Howe. But if Mike Vrabel's here, I don't know. I kind of like the Arthur Smith idea that you're floating. I feel like that makes a lot of sense.
And is Billy O out the door if that happens? Or do they try to make that work?
Man, I don't know. It's like a lot
of... I put you on the spot here. I'll tell everybody. This was something I kind of came up with last minute, but it is fascinating.
I would say, no, if I gun to my head, I would say you hire Mike Vrabel, Bill O'Brien stays, and you give up Bill O'Brien the freedom to hire his full staff. Because I think Will Long was a good hire. You give Bill O'Brien the freedom to hire his full staff, and just go from there. That's what I think would happen. That's what I would do. But it all depends. Like, how does Mike Vrabel feel about it? I mean, he's not afraid to make some bold decisions and do what he wants to do. And I just have to assume that Kraft would give him that leeway to do that. But I think at the end of the day, Bill O'Brien would stay. That would be my guess.
Appreciate your time, man. Thank you for getting me more on the Vrabel bandwagon. I was, my Mayo thing, I was a little hesitant, but now I'm a little more excited. So appreciate you. Please, this is your time. Plug any work you got coming down the pipeline and anything else you want people to be looking out for.
You can follow me on X at Dak Randall. And as far as things coming down the pipe,
you gave in to X. You gave in to X.
Yeah, I gave in. I'm pro X. It's a different conversation. I'm okay. Not one of the haters. I'm fine with it. But as far as things coming down the pike, like I think I'm in the same camp as you and really everybody right now, just waiting and reacting with the Belichick stuff. And it's hard to really plan too much beyond that because it's like I need to know what happens there first. And then we'll get going. I got a couple other things I'm kind of trying to put together, but nothing to announce or anything like that.
And make sure you read Dakota's piece on NESN about Trent Brown, really illuminating stuff, just in case there's anything we didn't touch tonight. Thank you all for watching. Again, thank you, Dakota, for your time. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other.